Yeah, thanks for being here. I should say, so I mentioned in our little popcorn session that I just kind of broke my 1 year Webflow mark, but that doesn't mean I've only been doing websites for a year. I've been doing them for a very long time, since senior year of high school, which was longer ago than I'd care to admit. So it's been a while. And in that time, I did a lot of accessibility work at a university level as well as marketing firm level. So I've been working with it for quite a while. But when Rachael asked me to talk a little bit on that here, I decided to gear it a little more towards accessibility and Webflow and how Webflow can help with that, considering this is a Webflow group and all. So there's certainly a lot more beyond what I'm going to talk about tonight as far as accessibility goes. But these are just kind of the ones that you can really utilize Webflow for in the process. So it's 5 accessibility do's and a don't. So what is digital accessibility? It is the ability of a website, mobile application, or electronic document to be easily navigated and understood by a wide range of users, including those users who have visual, auditory, motor, or cognitive disabilities. Yeah, that is quite a mouthful. So to put it in more human terms, digital accessibility is about removing the barriers for users of all abilities to use your product, service, or website. Basically, you want people to be able to see and use your stuff, whether that's buying products, whether that's just getting information, or learning how to contact you. If they can't see your site, if they can't browse your site, they're not going to talk to you or your client, as it would be. So we'll kick right into the 5 steps and how Webflow can help with them. The first one, we're going to start simple with one of the most basic yet important steps you can take when addressing accessibility on a website. It's alt tags for images, basically. Alt text describes images to visitors who are unable to see them. This includes screen readers, browsers that block images, but it also includes users who are sight impaired or otherwise able to visually identify an image. So it could just be that they're hard of vision and they can't see real well. So they may have a screen reader to help them read that. All images should have alt tags set either as a description, or you can mark them as decorative if the image doesn't convey any meaning and it's just a graphic element. You want to keep your descriptions short, and using keywords, SEO keywords in those alt tags is okay, but you want to keep it relevant to the image you're describing. So you don't want to stuff a whole bunch of keywords in there just trying to rank better when it has nothing to do with the image you're actually talking about. So the examples here are from a podcast that we launched recently, and you can see that Apple, listen on Apple Podcasts, it's listen to the Influence Hacker on Apple Podcasts. So stuff like that can help, not only help your SEO, but it tells screen readers what this is, what this image is. Absolutely, if you ever have a text or an image with text in it, you want to put that text in the alt tag, because screen readers can't read images. So if they can't read it and you're trying to convey a message in that photo and it's not in the alt text, they're not going to know what it says. So it's very important to set those. So moving on, the next one after alt tags is keyboard accessible navigation. So basically, some users, such as those having a difficult time using the mouse, or people, again, that use screen reading software, oftentimes will rely on keyboard navigation to browse a website. So to test a site's basic navigability is just as easy as visiting your site, taking your hand off the mouse, and using your tab and enter keys to try to navigate throughout your site. So when you hit tab, as you can see in the animation here, you hit tab, it'll cycle through the various clickable sections on your site. Anything that's set up as a link, and then hitting enter. On most systems, hitting enter will take you to that link. Sometimes it's spacebar, depending on the browser and everything. But if you ever notice that some elements are unable to be focused, there is ways inside Webflow to fix this. So when you're building it, by default, most links get what's called an order in the tab index order of the site. But sometimes you will have elements such as a lottie animation or object that you set up an interaction on. And when you tell the interaction, oh, on click, it does this. So in this case, this is to open up a pop-up menu. But the problem is this isn't registered as a link. So when you're tabbing through, this isn't going to be focusable. Really simple way to fix that in Webflow. You go into the custom attributes, add a custom div attribute of tab index, and you set the number order you want it to be in. So by setting it as 1, when you hit tab, this will be the first thing that gets highlighted. Let's say, you've got a navigation bar, but then you've got another one of these, you can count to see, okay, this should be the 10th item. And then you can set the numbers that way. And if you ever want to custom order which order your stuff goes in, you can do that manually as well by setting all of those. Also, fairly recently, Webflow added the ability to style what the element looks like when it's keyboard focused. The default is simply just an outline with, I think, with a little bit of a glow on it, but you can jazz it up a bit if you want. You just go into the selectors and you choose the focused keyboard one, and you can go style it away. You can make it glow orange or outline in red or whatever you want. So there's ways to style it up a little bit if you'd like to.
That's a question.
Of course. Oh yeah, by the way, if you have any questions, feel free to interrupt me, please. I'm happy to be interrupted.
Yes, per your last slide, in the options for styling here in the selector styling, what's the difference between focused and focused keyboard?
Focused is I think when you hover, I think with the mouse, it's like when you're choosing it, I think. I'm not positive, I haven't played with that, but I know focused keyboard is for when you're tabbing through.
Okay.
I believe focused is on, isn't it when it's like if an input is focused, that means that the cursor is in the input.
That could be right. That could be for a form field.
Yeah.
So like an input specifically for a form?
I believe so, but
it could be. That sounds right.
But I don't know.
To Google that one.
I don't. Well, yeah, you've got a. It looks like you've got a button here that's got a so maybe you could focus a link.
Or it might even be if you click on like a div, maybe that considers it focused. I'd have to search a little more on that one. I've never actually used that one.
I know I've used it for form fields. I haven't used it for anything outside of form fields.
Yep.
Okay.
Is there a way to put the tab index like in the flow? So let's say like this is going to come up partway down the page. I don't know if it's 1. I don't know if it's probably not 1. I don't know if it's 10. Like, can I just put it so that it's like, put this in the, like, make this tabbable?
I think you have to set a number for it.
Okay.
So if it's something you're inserting into the tab flow that isn't there naturally, you end up having to give it an assignment.
Okay.
So in that case, the best way to do it is just go to your site and see, okay, count, this one should be here, kind of a thing.
Okay.
And anything that is manually added, the way that you're talking about, wouldn't have anything in that custom div attributes field.
Right.
That would just be blank.
Right.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
So yeah, of course. So we had alt tags, keyboard accessible navigation. Next one is color contrast. So with colors, you want to use colors in a way that those with vision impairments or color blindness won't have issues navigating or experiencing your website. So consider, for example, contact form errors, this example on the left here. For most of us, we fill out a form, we hit submit, it gets something is outlined in red. We know we screwed up. We know, oops, we didn't put something in right there. It doesn't like what we did, whatever. But if you're colorblind and that's the only indicator that something is wrong, you're not going to have any idea what's going on. So a lot of times, you don't want to use color to convey a message. You don't want it to be the only thing to convey a message. So if that's the case, if that's how you want to do it with this, you also want to have an error that pops up and says email field invalid or something like that. So don't rely on color itself to convey messages. Use it obviously for decoration, for design, and to convey messages, but just not the only way. Be aware of contrast issues with other colors and background images. Oftentimes we use background images, behind text. The text on top can easily get lost in the image, more so when the text is over a video, which is constantly changing. So you want to make sure there's enough contrast between the objects behind it and the text so that it's easily identifiable and read. Also keep in mind, point number one, just because you can see the letters easily over a green background doesn't mean everybody can. Those affected with the most common form of color blindness, it could just disappear completely, text on a green background. So you want to be able to test those things and check what's going to be next, which is contrast ratios. So as far as accessibility it's kind of graded in terms of A, AA, AAA. And AA is kind of the standard for what you want to develop for. AAA is above and beyond. You're really hitting it home. A lot of times that is kind of reserved for places that are really geared towards individuals with disabilities, because they do every little thing that you can do. And there's a lot, and it's a lot of work as well. But the contrast ratio for large text is 3:1. For body text, it's 4.5:1. Would you be able to identify that? Probably not. So this is another situation where Webflow comes in, and Webflow has got your back on this one. So when you're in the color picker for text or anything, if you click over on the little contrast ratio, you click the I button here, you get a little guide that shows up. And if you click within the guide, it'll give you a grading as to whether it's good enough or if it'll fail. If it's outside, in some instances, when you have a dark background, the white part up here doesn't fall within the guide, even though when you obviously see it, it says it's passing. But it'll show you like the range where it is. So you can see over here when you're changing your hue section, the safe zone shifts and shows you where you can pick. And if you want to go, AAA on this, you certainly can, and it'll tell you how you're doing on that. So it compares the text or the color of the text against the background that's going to be behind it, and it will give you that contrast ratio number right there.
So you need to be between the two lines.
Yep. Ideally, you want to be between the two. If you went below, that's when you start moving into AAA. So what they show you is kind of the AA zone, which again is the kind of the basic or the standard where you aim when it comes to accessibility, is you aim for the AA. Let's see here. All right, so now we've gone the first three. And
does Webflow have a colorblind mode?
It does. I will get there. Don't you spoil me.
I wasn't sure. You talked about colorblindness. I didn't want to.
I'll get there. Number 4 is heading hierarchy. Again, this is one that's pretty common. Most people know. Put your headings in order. You want them to go H1, H2, H3, H4. It seems really simple and it seems really basic, but a lot of people, when they're designing, they're like, oh, I want this bigger. I'll just make it an H1 because by default that gets a little bigger. That's the wrong way to do things. It's really important to make sure that you follow the flow for a lot of reasons. It helps screen readers organize the site. It helps people who might have cognitive disabilities or learning disabilities. It helps them get kind of an outline of what's going on. People who have a hard time reading or who have dyslexia, the less they need to read to get the point across, the better. So doing it right puts it in a nice, easy to read, easy to browse format. And obviously Webflow makes it easy to set your heading levels, but even better is that they set it up so when you go to publish or if you go to your audit, it just straight up tells you skipped a heading level. Like it'll say right here, you went from an H2 to an H3. And you need to go back and fix it. And if you click on it, it brings you right to where it is, easy to fix. So Webflow really helps you be able to fix that. And like I mentioned, visual flow for everybody, proper flow for screen readers. makes a big difference to people. All right, and so the last of my 5 to-do tips is going to be HTML tagging. This one can be a little tedious. It's you basically what you're doing. Again, it's geared towards a lot for screen readers, but you're telling these screen readers the makeup of your site. So, we've got our flow in the navigator over here and all of our different sections and divs and everything like that. Well, when you click on any of them and you go to the settings, there's the ID, but then there's the tag section. You go in there and set your navigation, set your header as a header, set your navigation as the navigation, set your footer as the footer. If you have a blog or you have articles, set your CMS list item as an article, set your sections, because that it all just kind of goes into helping the screen reader flow through the site and identify what each section is for people who may not understand it or who can't tell what it is. The other thing that it has some effect on is SEO. If Google knows what it's looking at, it's going to rank you better. If it doesn't have to struggle to figure out your website, it's going to rank you better. And that kind of goes with everything in accessibility. Everything you do in accessibility is going to help your SEO. It just straight up will. You're organizing your site better, you're making it easier to navigate, and you're telling these software solutions how to view your site and what the content of your site is, which ultimately is what Google's doing. Their software is looking at your site and interpreting it. So everything you do is going to help SEO as well as accessibility. So Webflow's accessibility tools, they have a bunch of different stuff you can do. The visual impairment simulator, Kyle, will render your site simulating various visual impairments. So to get that, it's actually up in the canvas settings. So like where you would set kind of by your breakpoints, it's not the easiest to find. I actually wish they would move this to the audit, but so you go up there and then down near the bottom, you've got visual impairment simulator, and you can choose all of the various, a whole bunch of the various color blindness. And you can see in these 2 samples over here how it changes. I don't remember which one each one is here, but you can see the colors change or disappear completely. And this is how it will simulate it on the site. So you'd be able to see, oh, this text almost disappears when I, with this one. I might want to rethink how this is displayed. So that's the visual impairment. You've got the color contrast part that we kind of went over, being able to find the safe zones. And then last is not last, but additionally is the accessibility audit. And this is on the left side in your toolbar there. It's the little square. And also when you go to publish, it'll show up down in there as well. And it just alerts you to, a few basic accessibility checklist items to look for. Alt text, it'll tell you if anything on the page is missing any alt text, the headings, and then non-descriptive link content. Now that's something I didn't go over, but basically that's saying don't have a link that just says click here. Have it be related to what it does. So read the article or click here to email us, something so they know what this button is doing for them. And it'll tell you right there, what it is. With that one, you sometimes will get a lot of false positives, especially if you do something like have the text in a paragraph say to email us, click here, and then click here is highlighted. It views that as just saying, oh, it just says click here, but in context of the paragraph, it's actually okay. So there's a little bit of interpreting that needs to be done on your part when you see something like that, but it just helps highlight it. And then the last tool that I put on here is their checklist. And if you go to that webflow.com/accessibility/checklist, it is a very thorough and interactive checklist that you can go through. So if you're, getting ready to launch a site, you pull that up, you're able to go through and you can click when something's done. So it'll cross it off for you. And you can just go through the checklist and check everything. And obviously, it's Webflow, it goes a step above. It doesn't just say do this, it also explains why and how. So if, there's something in there for alt tags, it says why that's important and how you go about doing it. So that's a really, really good resource when you are doing any kind of accessibility audit on your site, or before you launch a new site, or before you launch a new page on a site, anyway. So that's our 5 do's that I wanted to talk to you about. But I'm pretty sure in the title, Rachel put something in there about a don't as well. So I really only have one don't for now, but it's a really, really big one. That is, do not use overlay systems. There are a whole bunch of overlay systems out there that claim to be really simple solutions to getting you fully accessibility compliant. And and the one I have personal experience with is Accessibility. Many of these systems claim total compliance, preventing lawsuits, providing totally accessible websites, but actual users with disabilities and a whole lot of doctors and therapists, actually I think the number is over 700 at this point, have signed an open letter advising against using such systems. Like I said, I have firsthand experience with Accessibility, and I'll tell you that they both sound and look really convincing. The thing to keep in mind is the best way to develop for users with disabilities is to listen to users with disabilities. I was sold hard on Accessibility by one of their salespeople. They made a great case. We had just had a client who got sued for accessibility, and we were like, okay, we need to dig into this. This was at a previous place, not at Lenker, by the way. But we were like, okay, we need to hit this hard. We need to look at solutions for all of our clients. And in doing so, we realized this is a lot of work. Back then, I was not using Webflow. We were coding straight up HTML, CSS websites. So doing all these changes required a lot of digging into code, which meant a lot of work. So when Accessibility came along and showed me all their shiny stuff, I was like, this is amazing. You put a line of JavaScript on your site, you publish it, it gives you this nice overlay that does, reads the site, it'll change colors, it'll stop motion, which is cool. And it in some way, it probably is a little bit useful, but ultimately it's not going to stop you from getting our client from getting sued. People still can't access your site. It looks great, but in actual use, people with disabilities can't stand them because they don't actually work. So that's why this is a big don't. It seems tempting to go with the easy magic bullet. It doesn't work. And if you go to overlayfactsheet.com, you can read all about why it doesn't work, and about why they don't want people using it, basically. And again, if you really, really want to look into the accessibility of your site, talk to people with disabilities, listen to people with disabilities. Even if you go to like Fiverr, there are people with disabilities on there who will give you a report on your website and its accessibility and how accessible it is with screen readers or anything like that. So if you're worried about it, look into those options as well. So basically, make accessibility a part of project planning and creation, not an afterthought. Going back to fix problems that arise after a site launch not only wastes time, but it wastes a lot of money. If a client loses business because their site is inaccessible, that's on you as the developer and designer. In fact, if the client gets sued for ADA compliance, there's a risk that they could pass that along to you. I've seen when our one client had gotten sued, we started researching it a lot. And there are so many articles out there saying, hey, you're getting sued for ADA compliance, blame it on your web developer, pass it on. They'll sue them now instead of you because your web developer didn't do it, which puts you in a really tough spot. So insist on it, basically. Think about it like making blueberry muffins. You can't exactly go back after you make the muffins and put in the blueberries. They're part of the recipe. I mean, you could, but it would probably be really messy. So why not just avoid it entirely and do it right from the start? So what now? Consider accessibility and inclusion in everything that you create. Consider how someone with different ability levels might access what you're creating and putting out into the world. Pay attention to the content you interact with and see how others are handling or not handling accessibility. And if you notice a new way of doing something or an opportunity to improve what you're currently doing, go with it, try it out, test it, and run with it. Because when we all do better, we all do better. And these are just a few other tools you can use that are not Webflow related. There's Chrome developer tools using the built-in Lighthouse, and then dq.com/axe has a nice little tool browser extension as well to scan and get reports on your accessibility levels. And they also have a lot of classes and webinars and whatnot that you can listen in on. So that's what I got.
That was great.
Any questions?
No,
I
but
got a lot of questions.
that's true.
So-
I almost felt like I saw Kyle's heartbeat faster with these other tools sections as well. Kyle, for anyone who doesn't know, Kyle's a tools man.
Tool guy.
Tool guy. But yes, your questions.
Sometimes people just say I'm a tool, but that's a different thing. I've got a list. People can jump in as they want if they've got some, but I could keep the conversation going here. One of the questions I have, so decorative, use of the alt tag decorative. How liberal are you with your application of decorative to your stuff? Like icons, images, like lifestyle images of people just like doing their thing. Like when it comes down to it, like a lot of the sites I build aren't like there are a lot of them are like brochure sites, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like get in touch. And so in a sense, every image is kind of decorative in a way. And so I'm just kind of curious, where do people like to draw the line with what's decorative, and then what do you throw the alt text on? I mean, so
well, so in my opinion on that, and what I've come across before, like for instance, we have a client who's a painter, and they were very particular about the images that show up on their site. You know, we had these images on there, like, we don't like this one, we want this one there. You know, oh, we don't like that stock image you found, find a different one. We don't like the wall we don't want it blue, make it white. It's really important to them what that image looks like. So why would you not want to describe that image to someone who can't see it? You know, so it may just be a stock image of a house painted blue, but the client is putting that on there for a reason. You're putting it on there to add some context to the site or to their service. So with things like that, well, you could argue, yeah, okay, it's just a stock photo. It's pretty decorative. It's also not hard to just say house painted blue or blue house in a suburb community or something like that. You know, most of ours, you know, we'll do, like, if that was it was a blue stock photo, we would say something like, you know, a blue home or what we say, something like a split level house in the suburbs painted blue by Cityscape Painting, you know, something like that. So there you're getting some of your keywords stuffed in there as well, but you're also describing the photo for someone who can't see it. It may not mean anything. It may not be crucial to understanding the content on the site, but there's a reason that they wanted that one there or that you're putting it there. And why not put it out there? So things that I will mark decorative are page dividers. If you have an image that's a page divider or a little curly cues or something like that, those will mark decorative, or shapes that are there strictly for accents. Those things are decorative. Icons for stuff like social media, find us on Facebook. That's your alt text.
I'm thinking, like,
but
rebuilding our website for for the insurance company that I work at, and we might talk about, oh yeah, we could get you you know, umbrella insurance, or like errors and omissions coverage. So we like throw on a icon of a document, right?
Mm-hmm.
and it's just there. It's literally there so that it's not just all words on the page.
Yep. Is it
But-
usually paired with like a header? So like it would be the
Yeah.
document and then errors and omissions.
Yeah.
I mean, in that case, it might make sense to call it decorative, but you know, and in that case, it probably would. Because I mean, what are you going to say? Icon of a document? I mean, you could, but you know, in that particular case, yeah, marking it decorative probably wouldn't be
Icon of a
hurting anything.
Christensen Group insurance policy for
for homeowners
for
under 30.
homeowners.
Can I throw my 2 cents worth in here?
Absolutely.
I tend to kind of describe the image because I look at it as, you know, the person who is not sighted doesn't get the opportunity to see what that image looks like. But the reason you've put it there for a reason, you put it there as part of telling the story.
Yep. And
so describing the image in your alt text is, you know, giving the non-sighted person or the person with visual impairment a glimpse into, you know, just a little bit more information into the story. It makes the site come alive for them a little bit more. It gives them an opportunity to visualize, you know, in their mind what you know, a sighted person is seeing.
That's a good
And you
point
can put a
too.
little SEO into it as well,
Yeah,
right? So it's like
exactly.
if you're looking, you know, it's like I just did an insurance site, right? So, you know, it's like a woman putting in her credit card on the payment page, right? So it's like, you know, and I didn't do as a lot of SEO, although I have, you know, done that in the past with alt text, is sort of like, you know, woman putting her credit card in to pay her insurance premium or something like that, right, into her laptop computer.
Well, it's a good point too. Like, you know, you're not only trying to make the website usable by people, but why not, like you said, give them the experience of the website. Like your goal shouldn't just be the bare minimum, making it usable. You know, you're wanting to make your site experience as close to the original intent as possible for these people who can't see it the same way or can't use it the same way. You know, so you want to make it that experience, you know, as best you can.
Because the thing that I sometimes think is I'm just like making up stuff. This is a picture of a house. And so I'm like sitting there thinking, I don't think that this isn't Hemingway or anything, you know, this is like me just making stuff up. And then I'm thinking, am I just making this experience worse for people because now they've got to read the stuff that I'm just like making up, you know, instead of giving them just the good content. Now they've got to like sift through all the stuff that I'm just like making up because, you know, and so that's sometimes what I'm thinking, but I see your point is that you want to.
Yeah, because they're going to be using a screen reader. So the screen reader is going to tell them, it's going to just say image, right? As opposed to image, woman putting credit card information into a laptop computer, right?
I mean, you could always be really accurate and be like, boring, uninspiring image of. You're not missing anything here. But if you want to know.
Well, and you know, consider too that it's not just people who can't see, period. It's people who can't see well. So they may be able to see, okay, you know, I can tell that's a house, but having that description might help, you know, like I can't quite tell what I'm seeing there. Then you pair that with the description and okay, that clarifies it.
I wonder as well, like it would be maybe in that case, you would wonder if you were missing something, because if you happen not to design it for accessibility and you are inferring meaning through the images, if that happens all the time, you would want to know that that's not the case. To be reassured that that image is not relevant to the page content. And I was going to say before, like, because I've gone through the images in the asset library and Webflow, going through and putting the alt tags and decorative and non-decorative, and I feel like if it's hard to describe, that's usually because it's decorative. Like anything that isn't decorative shouldn't be too difficult to like whack out a quick description, you know, person doing this sort of thing. And then if it's a struggle, it's like, okay, so if I can't think of what this really is trying to communicate in 10 seconds that I'm looking at this thing, then it's because it really like doesn't matter at all. At which point I would call it decorative, but I kind of found that that was an easy demarcation for me while I was going through the process.
Right, Kyle, have you ever used a screen reader, or like, do you use a Mac?
I use a Mac, yeah.
So you can actually test your site, right? So you can turn on screen reading and test it so that you can, see what it sounds like for somebody who is,
Is that a
using
Mac
screen
thing, a
reader.
Chrome thing, a Safari thing?
It's
All
a
of the
Mac
above.
thing. Yeah, I'd say
I suppose.
it can be done everywhere.
Yeah.
If you go into system preferences, there's universal access.
Yep.
And then you can turn it on there. And then there's like keystrokes that you can use to access it. And
It takes some learning.
it does. It does. And and I'll tell you, I was testing it out the other day on my site and kind of going, man, either having a tab and a keyboard or use a screen reader. It's like, please, I hope I never, ever
It's
have
not
to
easy.
do that. It was not fun, and some of that may have been my skill, but also it would just be, I'm so used to just zipping around sites. I can't imagine
Yeah.
what it must be like. So whatever we can do to help.
So I've got my next question. Do you feel like so this is what I sometimes run into, like I'll get a design from a designer and it's a white background, and anytime the color is going to pass accessibility, you're basically at like 3s, 2s, 1s, or 0s, right? You're like, you've got to be, it just narrows your design. It narrows the design nuance, right?
Yep.
And I never know. And I guess maybe the question that I'm wondering is, does it ever feel like the contrast ratio, like if you're gonna do it, like it almost is limiting to the design, and it may, like, you're basically black text on yellow, black text on white text on like 3s, 2s, or 1s, and that's that's kind of your site? Or do you feel like, does anyone run into that? I feel like sometimes I'm like, every time I check, it's like the options for accessible contrast are really low.
Yeah, I mean, I there's certainly times where I have to yell at our designer and say, dude, I got to change this. It's not going to work that way. And, he doesn't love it, but he gets it. I guess I have found when I've had to make those changes that the range of colors that I have available is enough that I can get it close. I mean, if it's something where he was doing, and I mean, this certainly has happened before, where he's done like a light blue text on a white background, and, I can see it design wise.
Oh no.
Oops.
Just lost him.
Could be a worse frozen screen.
So
He's having a nap.
But it
Looks
doesn't
like
work, so we're not doing it.
we lost
you
you
do
there.
take some hits sometimes on the artful design to make it usable by everybody.
Hey, Dustin. Dustin?
Yeah, and he's gone again.
Everyone
Hmm.
freeze, and then he'll think that we're all frozen, even though so I'm running into that now, where I'm working with a designer who's I think he does really nice, elevated, like nice designs, and he likes to use a lot of really small text, and not always the darkest. And so what ends up happening is, we're using, he'll dip down to 13, 13-point font for some of his labels and captions and things. And so it looks really nice and refined, but especially once you're into that like 13, and then you're at like not a full dark black, it's it can be a challenge. I think is what I'm trying to say.
What's the audience?
People who need great homeowners insurance.
So all levels, all ages, right? I can tell you, being 62.3 now, there are days when I hate designers or when I come across an older site, because my eyes are not as good as they used to be. And, you know, especially when, you know, I'll come across one of those, you know, light gray text on a white background and, you know, perhaps smaller than I'd like. And I'm like,
Yeah.
this is really annoying. I get it now. I didn't get it. You know, I mean, I got it 10 years ago because they told us, but, you know, now I actually experience it, and it's frustrating.
So what's the smallest text size you'll go at?
When I do something, I'm 16 pixels most of the time, you know.
Do you ever dip lower than that?
I might, yeah, depending on what it, you know, what it is, or, you know, depending on the font, it might be a little
Yeah, that's a
smaller,
good point.
but bolded or something as a headline. But I mean, I like text at 16, maybe 15. It's, again, it also depends on the font too, right?
There's
Yeah.
also, isn't it, white text on dark backgrounds is harder to read in general along the
Yeah.
same lines as the sort of
Definitely.
Yeah,
lighter.
it gets blurry, right? When
Yep.
you've got white text on a dark background.
Yeah,
you
that
just-
bleeds
instead-
in. The colors
Yeah.
bleed in.
Yeah, so, you know, if you're
Yeah.
going to do that, make your text a little bigger and a little bigger line height.
Mm.
But Kyle, I was thinking, I was just checking, Figma has a colorblind plugin called Colorblind, and I don't know exactly what it does, whether it's
Yeah.
just color visual impairment or if there are other things, but that might be something to get your designer to use, to sort of, so that he gets a chance to sort of understand
Yeah, that's a
that,
good.
as
that's a
opposed
good
to you
point.
telling him, you know.
His thing was like, because I brought up, I was like, you know, we're not passing contrast here, and he's like, it's and like and this is maybe this is the, I don't know, maybe there's not gray area, I don't know, but like you said, was it 3.5 or something? What I don't remember for body copy what the contrast ratio was, but like let's say it's 3.5 and it's at 3.3. You know, he's like, that's, you know, is that magic number really 3.5? And if it's 3.4, then that's no good? Or is there some, is there some, you know,
Well,
wiggle room there?
the guideline, if it's AA,
Yep.
then that's what AA is. It's
In
whatever that
practice,
ratio that, yeah.
like in practice, the user probably will still be able to see it at that, probably.
Sure.
But the fact of the matter is, if they decide to sue you, the law is going to say it should be 4.5 to 1, and it's 4.4. You did not meet that. So
Yeah.
yes, in practice, maybe 4.4 is good enough to see for most people, but it doesn't meet the guidelines.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you look at it, the difference between 4.4 and 4.5 is probably completely imperceptible.
Yep.
But if that's what,
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but there's not flexibility on guidelines. I mean, there can't be, otherwise they wouldn't mean
what
anything.
would then, well, 4.3 would be okay.
Yeah,
then, right?
exactly.
And I'm not
That's
trying
the-
to,
no.
I'm not trying to dismiss accessibility. I'm bringing up a lot of these things for, like, to explain some of the things that I've gone
Mhm.
through, to also
Mhm.
just to have good conversation. So I'm not saying that like this should be 4.1. Like we should,
Right.
you know, I'm more for the discussion's sake.
I
Hey,
would
that's
I'm not
Yeah, I
taking the
have
side of
a-
not accessible. Let's put it
Can
that
I
way.
ask a question?
Yeah, go for it, Jim.
Yeah, Dustin, what's your stance on like adding what you call it? ARIA tag? You know, when I saw those, you know, compliance checkers, you know, they mark it, you know, okay, so you're missing tags, ARIA tag
Yep.
here, there, and I have no idea how to do that. And
Yeah, ARIA tags are a whole nother monster.
Mhm.
They're super useful and they're really important, but there's a lot to learn with them.
How do you spell Aria?
ARIA.
Okay.
I've seen it. I don't know what it is. What is it?
They're basically ways to label different elements. So, you know, you would probably add ARIA tags to a lot of form fields to say this form field is for the first name, this form field is for last name, this is your address. You can use them on so many different areas of the site. I mean, I will admit that I don't know a lot of the ARIA stuff. There's a lot of that stuff to learn and a lot of room to improve on that for myself. But you can, in Webflow, you would use in the same way you do the tab index. It's a div, element that you just add to it. You just need to know what you're adding and why. So that's something on my to-do list, is to learn more on that. That's kind of where I want to grow in the accessibility side of things right now, because it is important, and it makes a big difference. Because you're right, you run checks on any of the checking software. I mean, you'll see just tons of marks come up saying, do an ARIA label here, do an ARIA label here, but there's a lot to understand about it.
Okay. So
Which
how are
checking-
you currently doing it? Are you putting the, like an embed element, or are you putting the custom attributes like tab index? Or
I do the custom attributes when it's needed. Like basically what you said, when I'm told, hey, you should be putting this here, I'm like, okay, let's put these things in here and try to get it put in properly. So I'm hoping at some point I'll get to the point where that's a proactive thing for me, not a reactive thing.
Yeah. Do you happen to know any other online course for Webflowers on like how to approach this kind of
Well,
accessibility thing?
I think if you take a look in the chat,
Ah,
Oh,
Corey,
I was just trying to find that.
Yeah, that video is pretty
Okay.
recent and is really good on like a baseline of just even applying them and using them. And I would say like a common rule of thumb is ARIAs should not be a primary. They should be a secondary like thing you need or you use if you can't solve it with a semantic HTML element like sections and mains and lists and all those kinds of things that Dustin had shown. And then there's like other instances, like an interesting example is you can't do tables in Webflow, because tables are also like OG web dev. But you can make a table with grid, CSS grid, and then you can use, like if you Google div table ARIA attributes, then you can like label all the cells and rows and things in a way that for a screen reader, it'll still read out like a table would and should, which is super valuable for things that, really a table is the best way to do it for like, like spec sheets or something like that. And then the last thing I would just say, like one of the most common ones I use is hiding things actually. So like ARIA -hidden equals true. And so again, just adding it in your element settings panel when you select an element, and then the name is ARIA -hidden, all underscore, and then the value, the second field is true. And then the reason for that is like if you want to provide some kind of a text in a separate place that will read out what is happening, and you don't want and you don't want to distract from something else, then like you use the ARIA hidden to not have something else distract. And an example there is even just like, have you ever had like a card on a page and you want the whole card to be clickable, right? And you could just like put the whole thing in a link block. But if there's a lot of content in that card that actually will read very poorly to a screen reader, because it will like come into the card and it'll say link block, image, blah, 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 heading, blah, 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 paragraph, blah, 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 blah. By the time it gets done reading it, you probably forget that it was a link block. And so instead you could do like a card that has all that content, and then you have like an overlaid link block on top of it that has some text in it, and then that text is hidden visually, but not to screen readers. But then you might have like a button in the card that visually looks like the button you'd click, and that is what you would hide with ARIA hidden. Sorry if that's a little weird to explain verbally.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. I think,
Very
like I said, the rule of thumb is definitely it should be something you use as a fallback, because there's not a HTML element to handle it. So.
Is that
How much, or go ahead, someone.
no? Go ahead, Kyle. Well, actually, I suppose I was just going to ask if that was your video or if it's just a resource that you're aware of.
The video in chat? No, not mine. Not mine.
Okay.
Somebody in the community posted that like
Yeah.
last week, 2 weeks ago. I don't know.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
Jeremy from No Code North, actually.
Ah.
Sweet.
And
Yeah,
I was the
yeah.
guinea pig. I saw the original version and I said, "Oh, here,
Nice.
fix this and this and this," and then he fixed and he did it. So,
Oh,
yeah.
right. So you really should have found it first.
Well, I was trying to, but I was on the Slack channel trying to find it, and then it wasn't. I was trying to
Well, I
type
will-
on a different computer. I was a
I will watch
mess.
that one tomorrow morning, I think.
Yeah, definitely. It's really helpful, and it really shows you how to make some
Yeah.
things work. And I just
So
let
I-
him know that it got mentioned. So
So I get, you got clients who want these websites, and they're small, small websites. I suppose if I was to go through and like do everything to the T, go through the checklist, do it all, I would, probably wouldn't be a ton of time. But I check my alt tag. I always have alt tags on all my images. I make sure that my headings, I do a lot of the stuff just by default that you talked about. But there are things in there that I might not be perfect. And, especially as I'm like looking at this checklist, the Webflow checklist, if you were to go down through and do everything on there, that it feels like that could add another like 30% on the time of the project. Like it, and this is all about your, this is your blueberry thing, right? Your blueberry muffin thing is like, yeah, you got to start out, you got to take that into consideration. I'm just curious, like, do people, is that about right? Like when you're thinking through like, okay, so I'm gonna have to do this project, how much time am I gonna have to spend? I've got to design it, and I've got to build it. I've got to like polish it up. And then I've got to do all my SEO stuff because I got to have page titles and open graph images, and I've got to have descriptions, and I got to make sure that everything is, and now the last thing you go through, or you're thinking about the whole time, but you're thinking about how long it's going to take. Is it about like 30%? Is it, because it shouldn't be an afterthought, but it's a huge undertaking. And it's the kind of thing that, on some of these small sites, it could increase. It could, if you were to actually account for it for the time, I mean, it could make a site unaffordable to some people, right? I don't know. Opening that up for discussion, if people have had, any thoughts on how much time they allocate for accessibility, when it comes to budgeting projects and things like that.
Yeah, I'd be interested to hear, Dustin, if you feel like there's a solid chunk of time that it requires and if it's properly accounted for.
Oh, I mean, it definitely requires time. There's no question. The way that kind of we had handled it in the past when we had that one client who got sued and we started pitching this to our other clients at the time was, hey, we really need to do this. That we've seen what it can do. We were kind of coming at it from the point of at that moment, preventing our clients from getting sued basically, and not having that come to us. Now, since then, my mindset has changed into more of, you do it because it's the right thing to do, not because you're trying not to get in trouble. But at the time, that's how we were doing it. And trying to sell them on all of that extra work was hard. It was, be like, look, we need to do this stuff, but we're also not going to do it for free. And it sucks. And I actually really hated doing it. But at the time we had so many clients that were like, nah, we're not going to worry about that. We don't want to do that. We ended up coming up with a disclaimer for them to sign saying they're refusing it from us. So that way, when they get sued, if they get sued, they can't turn around and say, oh, it was our developer's fault. They never talked to us about it. So we had a contract from them saying, we came to them and said, this is something we're recommending you do. If you're denying it, you're telling us that you're turning it down. So that way they can't pass it through to us at a later time. Because
into disclaimers.
I am into disclaimers.
I've been so many of them.
We have the problem of Minnesota Nice here, where it's just like, oh, they just want this little thing. Just do it. It's not a big deal. Just do it. And then it turns into 3 hours, and then it turns into 4 hours. It's like, no, they need to know, and they need to sign and understand additional work costs money, and they got to pay for it. But so And then from then on, we started building that into the process, just knowing we're going to add. I mean, we sort of split the difference with the client when we did it. You know, if we knew, okay, this is probably going to take us 5 hours, we'd up our projects with them by a couple hours and just be like, knowing we're going to eat a little bit of it while we also work with them on it, kind of a thing.
Mhm.
That's how we had done it. I'm not saying that's the best way to do it by any means.
Dustin,
don't-
are you finding that as you've been doing it more and more, you're finding ways to simplify the process of doing it so that it happens a little bit more just as you're building?
Since I started working with Webflow, for sure. And since I started working with an actual team of people, the place I was at before was very small. There was like 2 of us that did everything. So now that I've got copywriters and I've got designers and stuff, I can tell them, you know, hey, when you're designing, do it. I'm not going to tell you how to design, but here's some guidelines to follow. And with our copywriters, I can say, you know, this is the kind of stuff we need, or here's all of the images that are on the site. Give me some alt tags. And, you know, I create a doc for them and they go through and they generate all the alt tags for me.
Wonderful.
So I don't have to do it, but when I'm going in and building it, I can drop them right in.
Do they have designer access or editor access?
They don't usually do. I'm usually the only one in Webflow.
And because I'm building a site right now, I wanted to have someone else write the alt tags and all the stuff. And then they had editor access and they're like, where do I do the alt tags? And they
yeah,
can't.
no. And that's definitely one thing I'm waiting for Webflow. They're, you know, and their big announcement, big list of announcements was, you know, being able to delegate access to certain sites. And for like freelancers, you can have them come in and work on a site in your account, but not have access to the rest of them. You know, can't wait for that thing. But no, the kind of the way that we've done it, I mean, anyone on our team could get in and access it, but they don't. We've used markup for a lot of that. So we'll put the site into markup and then send them the link and they will go through. A lot of times I'll even take like a screenshot of the asset panel and just put that on there and be like, you know, tag each one with what the alt tag should be. And we can, you know, they can see the images on the site or whatever, but I'll just send it off to them and be like, hey, give me alt tags for all the images or whatever.
Do you think it matters the file name? Are you updating file names as well?
So should I be? Yes. Am I? Not usually. From what I've read, it makes a difference, but not a giant difference. It's more of an SEO thing. Because, you know, Google Images finding stuff like that can just give you more traffic and helps your SEO. As far as accessibility goes, I don't know that it's an issue, but for SEO purposes, you should be. But it's such a small drop in the bucket that if I have the time, I'll do it. If I'm in a rush, I'll not.
So I've got a client, or go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think the file name will only be read from an accessibility standpoint if you don't set either decorative or alt text.
Right. Because it'll show the file name in the.
Right. So that would be the only place you'd want to be cautious. But I would +1 that I don't think I've ever I don't think I've ever gone and renamed things for that purpose.
Right.
So if you're coming out of Figma, do you have a lot of stuff that's like frame 1 parentheses
group 35.png? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I am personally a stickler on if I'm exporting it from Figma, it's so easy to change the name that I might as well just do it first instead of it being arbitrary. But
it's easy, huh? I'll have to talk to our designers about that. I hear it's easy to just change these.
So I've got a client built their website, and what they do is they retrofit homes for people with physical, I suppose, with impairments, right? And so they'll make it so that you can fit a wheelchair in a bathroom, right? And you can and so that literally, and now a lot of it is physical, but I suppose if people are, if they have a vision impairment, they would probably need help. And they wanted, and I can't remember if it was me that recommended, I mean, we obviously hadn't had this talk yet, Dustin, I hadn't heard your point of view, but we included user way, which is one of those overlays.
Yep.
And it sounds like you're recommending that I go to them and say, maybe we should take this off.
Yep.
And from an accessibility standpoint, the things that I think they liked was, oh, look at how big we can make the text. We can make the text so much bigger and so much more legible. And like, we can increase the contrast ratio so that it's super easy to read. And it sounds like what you're saying is, if you're building it so that the contrast ratios are already AA, maybe in this case, AAA, because of the likely target audience. If you're already building it with the high contrast ratios, and you're building it accessible, user way isn't going to add any functionality that they couldn't get with either a screen reader or things that they're probably using already on their own.
Basically. And I think too, part of the blowback from, if you go to that site about the, with the open letter for not using them, is it's sort of like buying a Valentine's present the day of versus putting thought into it. You're not putting any thought into accessibility. You're just you stopped at the gas station on the way home and put that JavaScript on there. There's no real thought, there's no real care put into it with those. You're just looking for the easy answer. And when it's not as functional as it should be, I'll admit, I mean, the reason I got sold on it is because it looks good. It looks impressive. It looks like it does what it needs to do. In fact, I can even actually share my screen. The company I used to work for, they still use it actually. Oh, is it sharing? Yeah, you're seeing it here. So if you're on the site, let's see if I can, when you're on so you go to the site and it's just a little icon down here, and you can, you do vision impaired and it makes things bigger. Cognitive disability, assist with reading and focusing. So when you hover over things, all of this stuff looks great. It stops motion. You can, like you said, you can bump the text up. It's super easy to bump the text up. But, stuff like this, if people are using screen readers or using stuff, they already have tools to bump the sizes up. They already have ways to do that themselves. But, even this little control panel in itself isn't always accessible. So it doesn't
the tool
work
for
as
accessibility
well as
isn't accessible.
Exactly.
It's almost like the tool is sort of just to impress people who don't actually need the accessibility.
It's to impress those of us who can see it no problem. And that's exactly it. It looks really cool and it looks impressive, but in reality it really isn't. And people, again, it's the listen to the people with disabilities and what they're saying, and what they're saying is that this isn't acceptable. So yes, my recommendation, in that case would be to move away from it. And
I think the site in like, if I were to go and, go through the checklist, like, you do the full checklist, there's quite a few things to go through, but I don't think that I would, it's not like I'd have to rebuild the site, right?
Right.
I would just add, like, even just one thought on even your original Kyle question Kyle that led into that, of just like the time, right? And I think for me and the teams I've worked on, it's been also one of those things where if you set up more and more systems around it that already have things accommodated, like we always, either on the team at Webflow or I work with a studio on the side, we always start from a like boilerplate, like style system kind of thing. If you've been in the Webflow community, you've probably seen like Client First by FinSuite and some of that stuff. Like we have things like that pre-built that at least for like typography being set in rems and not pixels, some like those basic things are there. And then even like components that are commonly used, having those pre-built and ensuring they're ready to go accessibility wise. even an example of that like is the Webflow team on the showcase. If you search for like accessible modal or accessible accordion, we have a clonable out there for each of those that's from the checklist. And those have like a little JavaScript snippet with them that comes as well that will make them like for the modal, like traps focus and does some other things. And so the point is that like the more you can build things ahead of time and have them ready to go, and then like while you're building pages, get in the habit of like make sure that you're adding like semantic HTML things while you're going. Make sure you're adding alt tags while you're going. Like it becomes part of your process. So then there's not really a whole lot to do at the end outside of the typical like run the audit in the designer. You know, maybe go through, go through run acts like you said. You know, or wave is another one. And so it ends up being like this. It's not a huge burden, and it's just part of the process, right? Like even to go back to your like question earlier about your designer on your team having like designing things that weren't accessible. It's like our responsibility for what we do, right? To accommodate certain things, just like you don't use papyrus as a designer, right? Like in my opinion, it should be no different. It should be in this realm of, even if you're not designing for the web and it's a poster, like let's not make the text 10 point or whatever, right? Like it's just like a simple balance. And I think what's ironic is like even small text as an example is something that was super trendy 8 years ago, 10 years ago. And then now like look at Apple, look at like all the biggest brands and what's like sought after as the best design. It's like huge type now. Like the type's so big, it's almost, it's the opposite. You can't even read it because it's so big. You know, like and so I think it's all in perspective, I guess, of your system and looking at how others are working. I don't know. But I would also just plus one what Dustin said on the tools. It's just the users that need these things are already doing this, like setting their default browser setting to large, or on Windows, they're doing the contrast thing. It's like, it's almost, if you think about it, it's almost selfish to assume that your own website is the only place they're going to need to adjust these things. Like, think about that. Like, you think the only reason they're open their browser is to go to your website? No, like they have something that's doing everything, right?
Yeah, they do it on your, it's like, what did they do on the rest of the sites?
Yeah.
You know? Good thing they came to our site.
No, but you know, I have to say, because Dustin kind of reappropriated this accessibility content from a presentation that he actually did at Lenker. He presented on accessibility standards in like web development for the Lenker team. And I distinctly remember, as part of your like, why do we do this pitch? It's like, A, it's the right thing to do. Don't be a dick. But then B and C were actually fairly compelling, because I think B was like, by the way, it's going to be law soon, so you have to get with it or get sued. And then C was actually the total number of people who are technically classed as having disabilities that require them to access sites from these different avenues and that require accessibility standards in order to be able to do that is really not negligible. Like a few percent of the American population is millions of people who otherwise aren't reading about what you do and what you can offer, and potentially, you know, signing up for your services or buying what you have to buy. So it's like a really huge number of people who end up not. Is this the original one?
Yeah, this is the original one.
What was your April Fool's joke? I've forgotten. It was in April.
There you go.
Let's start with the test. Okay.
Yeah, it was starting with the test, and it was find the accessibility issues in this code. Because the presentation was in April, so yeah, that was my April Fool's bit.
Dustin's a hoot to work with.
Yeah, I think this is what you're talking about, like with the number of cases and you know, numbers wise and stuff like that, just how much it's growing, you know, year to year to year. Let's see, I don't remember if there is.
Well, and the population is aging overall. I mean, we've got an awful lot of baby boomers that are just starting to get to that point of really needing assistance.
So if you have a lovely dark color scheme with small white text on it, you know, you're essentially cutting your market share by a large amount, because anyone on the upper end is going to struggle, get annoyed, and find somebody else.
Yeah.
So do you have a tool? I've used the HTML5 outliner before. This is years ago. To get that outline, it looks like you showed a screen grab of it on that one.
Yeah, I was using that same tool. Yeah.
Is that what you use? Is there like an outliner tool that you use or that integrates with Webflow that you like?
That was literally the one that you had mentioned. That's why I had that tool still, because
Oh.
you had mentioned it the one time. That was
Yeah.
the one that I used for that screenshot, just showing you the outline, and how it breaks it down based on the headings and all that.
It's almost like that, and Webflow, Corey, I don't know if you have the ears of the people at Webflow, but
don't admit it if you do, man.
Don't admit it. We're all gonna like show up in Des Moines.
Yeah.
So Corey, we were thinking.
Hey, I like any and all feedback. Like I said, I've used the tool long before I was ever there. So I rant about all the things it doesn't do or should do every day. So let it loose.
So Dustin mentioned, like, if you talked about wanting to give people access to sites, and I think they were talking about setting workspaces, I think is what they're calling it or something. I too cannot wait for that. It almost though seems like on the editor pane, when you add an image, similar to if you have a link where there's the gear and then you can change the link text or the link destination, it feels like you should be able to edit the file or edit the alt tag. It feels like that would be a way that you could get editors of sites to be adding in alt text of images. That's the first thing I was thinking, is that I don't think it requires getting people access to the whole back end. I think it's something that we could do that could be done for the editors. The second thing though is, I don't know if people really understand the HTML outline and how I think people use it as a way of like sizing things, not necessarily showing like, here's the chapter and here are the sections and here's a subsection of that chapter. And then, and so seeing, having it's probably, maybe it's in the impaired vision mode, maybe it's like in something like there, you could see page outline, and then you could see effectively what the page outline looks like. And that gives you a sense of like, what does this page look like to a screen reader? What does this page look like to honestly too, I think it's great for SEO and like, and helping with.
I think there's a lot of tools that could be added to the audit panel, that hopefully they'll continue, adding to that audit panel.
Yeah, I can definitely say that we have multiple people that this is their entirety of their role, is adding to accessibility things within the designer. Like right now, I think some of their main priorities is the elements panel. So like the slider, tabs, some of those like native elements, making sure that out of the box they're accessible. And then, maybe there'll be a day of like, there's been talk of like, should there be a native modal element or dialogue element, for example, since there is some like pretty nuanced things that should happen there. The view thing is super interesting. There is like, if you're in a team plan where two people can get in the designer at the same time, but one of them then is in editor mode in the designer, then I think you should be able to edit alt text and all that. And then like, I mean, I would even just super agree the editor experience separate needs some love. I mean, geez, I think one of my biggest beefs there is like, you can't publish to the subdomain separately. Like literally drives me nuts, because I constantly have to tell clients, hey, we're working on a page.
Publish.
Don't click that publish button.
Absolutely.
Yeah, stuff like that. And so there's definitely a lot of cool stuff coming. Many of which, was like talked about at No Code Conf and all that. And then lastly, I would say like the other thing that came to mind when you're asking those things, like I think the biggest thing we've observed that's I would put it as the scariest in terms of accessibility in Webflow is interactions. I love me some interactions, but boy, oh boy, has our community run wild with it.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, they
you know,
get crazy.
it's almost too easy to instill just like sickness inducing motion. Because like vertigo being like a really high percentage of the population compared to even other things is just real. And so also something, you know, we are looking into and tinkering with. This is where it's a small group of people. You guys are cool. So like the what, like an example there is one thing we explored this last Dream Big week is, we'll just say that if you look at like certain pages across no code or webflow.com or like no code conf, on the body there is an attribute that's like ix vacation, and what that is like a beta internally that we're pushing to get like finished and over the line, that will essentially automatically disable most interaction functions when somebody has preferred reduced motion on in their OS of their computer. And so like that would be huge, because like something like that would automatically enable like, you know, literally millions of websites to at least reduce motion, you know, and the trick is it, you know, there's this very gradual balance as well, where I think the big thing with Webflow as a product is like it gives you a ton of control, right? It's like almost the amount of control of scratch writing code, but visually, right? And so we also want to be very careful about just like relinquishing control in certain realms, because we've definitely gotten kickback for that in the past. So yeah, anyways, something else to consider.
Wait, what do you mean you've gotten kickback for relinquishing control?
Yeah, so an example of that is when you do like an anchor scroll, so like you set a button to click and you scroll to a part of the page and it like smooth scrolls down there. Well, that's like, that can be sickness inducing motion. And so we, at one point before my time, they had actually rolled out an update where automatically have it be instant. And if you don't want it to be instant, you had to add an attribute to the body. And there was like a lot of like backlash, people in the community that, you know, it's the hardest thing about all of this is like, it's a lot to teach, and it's a lot to like, for people to understand the why it's important. And so immediately people say, no, I want my flashy, fast motion thing back. Why are you taking it away from me? Right. And so it's like a nuanced thing on how to approach integrating that. So that people still feel like they have the full control, but like it's very clear that there are better and other ways to go about it, right? Yeah.
Can you explain, you were saying there's nuance with accessibility around modal windows. What is some of that?
Yeah, I can even just like show an example if that would help. I think I have that up. Hold on 1 second. I was just gonna open up like an example project.
You know, the other thing I want that bugs me sometimes, when I look on my styles and it says one, you know, and under your classes, it's like 1 on this page, 3 on, and then 3 on 3 other pages. I want to hover over that or click that and get a little thing that shows me what other pages that's on. Because I'm like, where the F else is this? I just want to know where am I using this? Because I might look at it and go, oh yeah, that's cool. Okay, I'll change
Doesn't
this
the
now.
FinSuite extension let you
No,
do
I
that?
think it's somebody else's extension that does that, but
I
doesn't.
know I've seen it.
It doesn't show you where it is, but it tells you that it's going to affect other things.
Yeah, I've
Mhm.
seen a
It's
few
like-
of something like that.
Is it a Chris Spaggs extension or something?
I have the one that's like,
one, if you change something, it will give you the alert, right?
yeah, see, like the
Yeah.
5 on other pages. I want to click on that other pages and I
That's
want to
right
see
here.
the 5 pages.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah.
so
Okay.
modal, there is a couple things here. So one, so like this is the same modal you can get out on the showcase. If you go to the showcase, search accessible modal, it's on the Webflow page. You'll see both this modal and this accordion. So for modals, you can see like when I tab into it, obviously an outline, that's not necessarily part of this. And then the trickiest part is probably the focus trap. So if you see, I'm just tapping tab and you can see it jumping back and forth, because without using JavaScript to not let you focus out of it, what happens is it'll go from the button to the close, and then all of a sudden your focus jumps out of what you're actually looking at.
Yeah.
So you can like easily get lost. And then the other part that's not quite as complex is just using the escape key to close. So that's just like part of keyboard navigation.
Yep.
And then behind the scenes, there's also some like, I think this one has like an ARIA label changing as well. Right, maybe, I forget now. Yeah. So same kind of thing here, like the accordion. If I inspect this one of the bigger ones is like saying if it's open or closed. So you can see ARIA expanded true and ARIA expanded false, and then that will actually change as you open and close it. So that way, like the screen reader hears, oh, this is a, I forget how it labels it, maybe even just as an accordion, and then now it's open, now it's closed, kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Oh, I'm so glad that we had this, because the site I'm building right now has got 2 modals that we just kind of reuse across the whole site, and then we've got some accordions in different places.
Yeah, I think another one that I had recently learned, or at least when I joined the team, that I never really thought about doing before is lists. When you have a list of items, like when you add a collection list, it will already have the ARIA labels in there to state, hey, screen reader, you have entered a list. This list has 4 items. Now you're on item 1 of 4. But if you're adding static elements in a list, whether that's in a grid or a vertical list, horizontal list, doesn't matter, it will not read that out. But you can, an easy way to do it is adding a list element, you know, like a bullet list element, and then just turn the bullets off and put all your content in those. And then you can still, like on the list wrapper, do flex or grid or whatever you want. And then it will naturally do all that list reading for you. So it's like a really, I think that falls in that realm of like, if you think about that while you're building things, you can like tackle stuff really quickly without even having to go back, right?
Okay, I want to show you this, so just so that I'm clear on what you're talking about. So this is the site that's got that I'm doing now. So here's the modal window, right? That comes up. And so I gotta add what you were talking about on your deals to make that. I wasn't even thinking about tabbing through, so that's great. But when you're talking about a list, like it could be a list of 3 things here, even though they're distinct things, they're not really even styled like a list, but they are.
Yeah, I mean, in this exact example, probably not necessary. It would, a list being like they are relevant things.
Like maybe down more like here.
Yes, great example, because these are all items that fall under the topic of our foundational pillars. And so, and this is where one of those things too, that like, I think the biggest thing I've learned myself, or even like teaching others, is like, there is subjectivity to some of this. Like that exact question, should I do it here or here? Like whatever you think is best. And the more that you do it, the more you'll learn. Like the most important thing to think about is just doing it in the first place. Like so many times I've seen people get like captivated or just like stuck by intimidation of not knowing which to do, so they do nothing. You know, and so it's like, it's more in this mindset of like, it maybe even err on the side of like that one at the top. If you aren't sure, then do it. I mean, like it doesn't hurt. If anything, it's still helpful to
and so then
and things.
Do you put the unordered list tag around the list items?
Right. Yeah. So like in this, for example, you probably have like, you know, 2 columns created here from grid or flex. And then around all of those ones on the right, you have a div probably already anyways, right? So that would just be your list wrapper. And then each item is the list. Instead
of a div, I'm just using a UL, and then instead of divs for each one of these items, I'm using a list item.
Yeah.
So this is a good example of like the parts where the text, I think, was like this blue. I don't even know what the contrast ratio. It was close. I think it might. I think the headings pass.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this blue, which is like it's like like a core, you can see it kind of everywhere, right? It's like a core brand. And he wanted the buttons to go lighter on and hover. So I'm meeting with him tomorrow so we can tweak a lot of this stuff. But this is a good example of like, I suppose there's guidelines for a reason, right? So this was the 3.4 or whatever we talked about. So,
I mean, and even just some encouragement, also part of the beauty and power of Webflow or any tool that will allow you to globally control things like color is that if you realize it after the fact, it's okay. Like you can probably, hopefully make a change in only a couple spots and it's done. Like candidly, like the no code comp site, I designed and built on the team, and our light blue color for that, we realized after launching it, that it was with white text was inaccessible, like just. And so we adjusted it globally, like after it was live, but it is what it is. Like, we learn and you do the best. And yeah.
Can you still see my screen?
Guide. Yeah.
So he built, and actually Penny, I used client first after we talked, after you presented, that was really helpful. But he built all this out kind of in Figma. And so I just rebuilt basically his style guide in Figma. I don't know why that one's red, but so yeah, it'd totally be easy enough and then I actually built them in the color and I organized them. So I've got like these, so it's just real easy for me to come right in here because they're all just like, it's primary blue, but then blue 80%, 60%, 40%, 20%, 10%, 6% on 3 different colors. So it actually is the first time I'd ever really like organized all my colors like that. But you're absolutely right. If I come in and I'm like, this blue is great for like brand stuff, but we need it to be a little bit darker for accessibility. It's easy enough to just change that. It's a good, let me see if I can even, I wonder what, this is a 296.
Huh.
So how do you see that? You click just into the element that has the blue background color or
text?
Is it
so I'm on the text.
It's saying how readable the text is? Like that's what the number. Okay, in relation to its background color.
So if the text was larger, would it?
Yes.
Would it pass? Because I know my blue, I've had to make slightly darker, but it was passing.
Yep.
So
okay.
It
calculates.
It's the combination of the color or the contrast and the size of the text.
In fact, I don't tell Cesar, Rachel, but just the other day I was doing, I think it was maybe key prime. I was going through and I noticed that some of them were failing on that. So I bumped the size up just a little bit until it passed. And I'm like, I'm not going to tell our designer about it.
Cesar is invited to these all the time, and it's so good he never comes. We always circle right back around to Cesar. Poor Cesar, we always butcher his designs when they come to us.
We love our designer.
So we're kind of saying right here, I'm not going to pass until I hit that. So if we wanted this to pass, we've got to go dark.
At that size.
At that size, yeah. Which, it's one of those two where it's odd because to me, that's harder to read than the white was, but you're talking about the math of it and everything. So
right now at the size you're at, change to white.
Yeah, that would probably pass.
That should work.
It doesn't.
That's kind of surprising. You're real close though.
Yeah.
I think this is an example actually where there is a new, I don't know a ton about it, but there is a new way that contrast is going to be evaluated for accessibility.
I was wondering about that too.
Yeah. I can't think of what it's even called. But I think
it always seems like
things.
It seems like the white is always excluded when it shouldn't be.
Mm-hmm.
Because that guide is always somewhere near the bottom. It very rarely is up at the top like that.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't. Oh, so this is a part where I would, basically say, drop it down into here, and now this is technically
interesting.
Okay. Well, I've got a meeting with the designer on, we're going to go through in a couple days.
Yeah, do it quickly. I know who I'm going to sue. You with the cash.
Nice.
Cool. Thanks. Really appreciate that, Rachel. Just don't go to any of my other client sites. That's all I ask.
Just lighting a fire under you.
This has been great conversation. I've really appreciated it.
Super
Great
useful.
contributions all around.
Yeah.
It's one of the
Likewise.
things I like most about this this group is the conversations at the end. So I always end up walking away with notes and things that I need to try and do and all that. So
I've got about 5 tabs open I got to look at tomorrow. So
Mhm.
Me too.
let me guess them. You've got the video on the ARIA tags.
the
I
other
don't know if
video
the
on
other-
the area tags.
There were 2 videos on the ARIA tags.
Yeah.
Yeah. Check your chat.
And
Modal-
then
modal page.
the modal clonable.
Oh yeah. Overlay fact sheet. I have that one
Yep.
open.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's a long read, but
Cool.
it's interesting.
Mhm.
Yep, I love it. You guys are the best. I'll let you, Penny. You're burning the midnight oil with us again. I appreciate it.
Oh, that's okay. I probably still I might even do a little bit more work. I'm doing a presentation at Floxy's for tomorrow on procrastination.
Oh, really?
So
What
Awesome.
getting her act together.
What time is
Wait,
it?
hold on.
Penny?
Yeah, so I've
The
probably
presentation
been
is
procrastinating on it. So.
the presentation is about procrastination,
And
It
you
is.
got to get it done because it's
and it's tomorrow.
Yeah, it's mostly
That
done.
is so
No.
meta. That
No
is so
irony
meta.
there.
I'm really good. I've known about this for 2 months since I picked the date and gave myself lots of time. And I mean, I'm not freaked out. I'm mostly done. It's
Have you
know,
ever heard of the
I have
blog?
tried, and I can't think it through. You know, I sit down to try to work on it, and it's like, I don't know, I've got gobbledygook in my head. So,
I've got another one for you that you can procrastinate on. There's a
oh,
blog
wait,
called
but why? I love Wait, but why? I was actually
Oh.
thinking about using some of his images. So,
about the
yeah,
monkey
yeah,
and,
no,
and
it's
like
good. Yeah, and the monster.
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm
no,
actually going to try to record a video right now
Okay.
talking about today's topic is created a little script to let people make a group of checkboxes to make one of them required. Because you can't do that out of the box, I don't believe. So wrote a little script, and then it'll check and make sure that at least one of them is required. If one's not checked, then you get a little error message.
Cool.
There you go.
I just put my new site in the chat.
Ooh.
Nice.
Take a look. So that's where it's there's a couple of pages that have the multi-site map markers.
Oh yeah. Oh, is Newman Insurance that's the one? Yeah, you just said that the one you did.
Yep.
Kyle, I creeped on your YouTube channel and I saw that you had that in there for Google Maps. I'm so gonna watch that. I just got done tinkering with Mapbox for the last couple of weeks to do the same thing, like multiple points from the CMS.
Oh yeah.
Love Mapbox, big fan now, but I'm very intrigued to see it done in Google Maps. Yeah, because I've had a project for that in the past, but we had to have this whole like middleware written that was hosted on Heroku and all this stuff. So I'm like, wait, like you've done this all on the front end. So yeah, I'm gonna check it out. Thank you for mentioning it.
So the one that I created, I suppose you could do it if you can only have one map pin per map. Penny said she created one where you could have multiple, and I guess, is that on Newman's?
Yeah, that's on Newman's. If you go to the contact page, it's there.
Yeah. The one that I did uses all you need. It's one per map, and you can pull an address from your CMS item. It's just got to be a text field. But I recorded the video. I got all the way to the end where I was like, all right, now let's publish. and I published it and it didn't work. And so I sat there and I was like, we'll debug on the video. It took me like a half hour. I was like, so then I had to start over. So I'm like, okay, we're going to do this again. So I figured it out. I debugged. I was like, oh, okay, great. So then I reset everything and I recorded it again, published, didn't work. So then the third time I finally figured, I don't even know what it was, but I got it. And I had recorded it and then I published, and I'm just sitting there thinking in my head as I hit publish, I'm like, if this thing doesn't fucking work, I am going to throw this computer out the window. So it's a little finicky because you're dealing with like Google, like cloud platform, which I'm not an expert on Google like that console, but you should be able to create, your custom styled map. You could probably take if you really like Mapbox, you could probably get styles from Mapbox and just export them and put them into Google. All you need is the JSON code. So
Brad.
Awesome.
There's locations my computer.
What's that?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Now I got like 3 more tabs to add to my list. Thanks.
I just Googled no code collab, and you were the first thing that comes up on my search page under the ad. Nice work, pal.
Boom.
There's not. I think I'm literally. I don't know if there's anyone named no code. That's like, if you would have said you searched for like no code and I showed up, I'd be like, wow. Like, I searched for this really unique name. You're the only one.
I put it in quotes and everything.
Basically, you just said, "Hey, Kyle."
It wasn't in quotes.
Kyle, I used Google and it works.
All right.
Well, alrighty, this has been great. Can't wait till the next one.
All right. Lovely.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great
Great
night.
to meet y'all.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Later.
you too. Take it easy.